The air in the house on Hauser Street was a thing of substance thick, with the dust of years and the sediment of unspoken sorrows. It was a place where joy came to die quietly, without a fuss. Archie Bunker, a man walled inside a fortress of his own bitter certainties, reigned from the sagging throne of his armchair. Each of his pronouncements was a stone hurled against a world that had, in his estimation, wronged him profoundly, leaving him with nothing but the small, hollow kingdom of his living room. And beside him, in the perpetual twilight of his displeasure, moved Edith. She was a creature of gentle apologies and nervous gestures, her high-pitched voice a constant trembling prayer for peace in a house that knew none. Her love was a vast, silent ocean, upon which Archie's anger floated like a derelict ship, going nowhere, menacing everything. The news of her Aunt Rose's passing arrived not as a shock, but as a quiet, inevitable sigh. For Edith, it was a summons to a duty she felt in her bones, a need to bear witness to a life's lonely conclusion. But for Archie, it was an intrusion, another demand from a world that only ever took, "I ain't gonna go." He decreed the words dropping like anchors into the room's heavy silence. He spoke of funerals as a weary veteran speaks of a forgotten war, a campaign of grim obligation from which he had earned his discharge. He had no respects to pay. He claimed for a woman who had only ever looked at him with disdain, who had branded him from the very start. He remembered her voice at his own wedding, a clear, cutting sound that had sliced through the hopeful noise of the day. "You're marrying a very common person," Rose had declared, and in that moment she had named Archie's deepest, most secret terror. It was the word that haunted him, the specter of his own perceived inadequacy. It was the reason for the walls, for the anger, for the desperate need to believe himself superior to someone, anyone. He even clung to the memory of a letter to a newspaper columnist, a phantom grievance he had nursed for decades, convinced Rose had written in to complain that her niece had married a bum. It was a wound he kept fresh. By touching it, a confirmation of the world's judgment against him. So Edith went alone. The funeral home was a place of suffocating quiet, and the cloying scent of lilies a sterile antechamber to oblivion. She found the slumber room a space of hushed reverence and empty chairs, and saw the still form in the casket. And there, in the profound loneliness of the room, she began to speak. Her words were a soft current of regret, a lifetime of unspoken apologies for a marriage that Rose had condemned. She spoke of Archie trying to paint a portrait of the good man she willed herself to see, the wonderful husband and father that existed somewhere beneath the layers of bitterness. She spoke of mischances of a lonely man with goats in his living room who had loved Rose a life of warmth that might have been. It was a eulogy not for the woman in the casket, but for the relationships that had withered and died in the shadow of her disapproval. Her quiet confession was interrupted by the arrival of a man, his face a mask of sorrow. They shared a brief, fragile connection, two strangers, united in mourning the poorly attended passing of a wonderful woman. But their shared grief shattered against a single terrible question. Aunt Rose, the man asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. "You mean that isn't Agnes Moncrief in there?" The world tilted on its axis. The body she had poured her heart out to, the silent witness to her deepest marital apologies, was a stranger. She was not just alone in her grief. She was in the wrong grief altogether. As she fled in a wave of shame, she heard the funeral director calling for chairs to be taken from her empty room to accommodate the overflowing crowd next door. Even in death, it seemed there were hierarchies of being remembered, and her family was at the bottom. Archie's arrival later was not an act of compassion, but a concession to a gnawing unease. He found her standing before the correct casket, now a solitary, desolate figure. A flicker of something like tenderness stirred in him a rare and unfamiliar sensation. He tried to comfort her, painting a picture of her own eventual funeral, a grand affair with mourners flocking from all corners. "And I'll be there, won't I?" He said the words meant to be a comfort, but they landed with the hollow sound of a promise made by a man who was barely present in her life. The escape to the country, a fishing trip with their friends Barney and Blanche, was meant to be a respite, but it was merely a transfer of their misery to a new, more claustrophobic location. Archie's animosity toward Blanche was a raw, open sore. He could not forgive her for her affair, not out of any moral principle, but because her transgression represented a chaos he could not control. Her sin, in his eyes, was a betrayal of the natural order, an order in which women were meant to be steadfast and predictable pillars in the lives of men. God expects more out of women, he declared his theology a twisted justification for his own rigid, fearful view of the world. The cabin became a pressure cooker. A game of Monopoly, a childish diversion, warped into a brutal proxy war for Barney and Blanche's ruined marriage. Every roll of the dice, every transaction of paper money was freighted with years of resentment. Blanche's recklessness with the fake money was a mirror of the recklessness that had shattered their real lives. Archie, seeing an opportunity to twist the knife, made a veiled reference to her affair with the exterminator. The game was over. The real, ugly conflict was laid bare. The night descended into a miserable farce of sleeping arrangements. Blanche refused to share a bed with Barney, forcing Archie into a horrifying intimacy with his friend. Lying in the dark side by side, the air thick with their mutual discomfort, Archie felt a primal revulsion. This was a violation of the natural order, a grotesque parody of companionship. His solution was an act of casual cruelty, a fabricated story of a monstrous spider designed to drive Barney from the bed in terror. In the other room, a different kind of violation was taking place. Blanche, her own life in ruins, tried to pick at the foundations of Edith's. She probed, asking about affairs, about dissatisfaction, trying to find a crack in Edith's unwavering loyalty. She proposed a vulgar bedroom scale, a pathetic attempt to quantify and rank the intimate lives she and Edith led. When she rated Barney a dismal 1.5, she was not just insulting her husband, she was confessing the profound emptiness of her own marriage. Edith's reply that she couldn't even get Archie on the bathroom scale was a moment of accidental, devastating truth. It was a confession, not of a lack of passion, but of a complete absence of intimacy. A man so distant, he was literally immeasurable. The night's true horror came when Blanche, stumbling in the dark, climbed into bed with Archie. The moment of contact was electric with confusion and disgust. The ensuing explosion of anger and recrimination was not comedic. It was the desperate shrieking of 4 people trapped in their own private hells, their lives tangled in a knot of resentment and regret. A fragile truce was eventually brokered by Edith, her simple folk wisdom a temporary balm on their festering wound. Barney and Blanche embraced a desperate, pathetic cling to the wreckage of their relationship. But as they all sought the oblivion of sleep, Archie, incapable of peace, declared it was time to go fishing. There could be no rest, only the relentless forward motion of his own discontent. His escape to the lodge convention was a flight from the suffocating domesticity of his life, a plunge into a regressive world of masculine performance. He called it a caucus, imbuing the sad, drunken spectacle with a sense of patriotic importance. It was a gathering of aging men, their faces flushed, with cheap liquor, their laughter loud and hollow as they performed desperate imitations of their younger selves. The jokes were cruel, the camaraderie a thin veneer over a deep well of competitive insecurity. It was a world where affection was expressed through humiliation, a place where a man passed out from drink was not cared for, but tormented. The prank they played on Archie was born of this casual cruelty. It was a meticulously constructed piece of psychological torture designed to prey on his deepest fears. Waking up in a strange bed next to a young, beautiful woman was not the fulfillment of a fantasy, but the beginning of a nightmare. It was the sudden, terrifying possibility that the fragile order of his life, his 30-year marriage to Edith, could be annihilated in a single, unremembered moment. His panic was real and profound. His stammered explanations, his desperate appeal to the sanctity of man, were the frantic prayers of a man staring into the abyss. When the prank was revealed, his relief was quickly replaced by a cold dread as the joke escalated into something monstrous. Maribel's faint announcement of his death transformed the prank from a simple deception into a horrifying psychodrama. His friends, consumed by a synthetic guilt, plotted to dispose of his body by throwing it from the window. In that moment, as he lay there feigning death, Archie was given a terrifying glimpse into the abyss of his friendships. He saw how easily he could be disposed of his life, reduced to an inconvenience, his death, a problem to be solved with a quick toss into the night air. He returned home to Edith, not with the swagger of a man who had survived a wild weekend, but with the haunted look of one who had stared into the void and seen nothing looking back. He had a new secret now, a fresh layer of insulation between himself and his wife, a private horror he could never share. The end began not with a bang, but with the pathetic fizzle of their television set. It died, and with it, the one reliable source of distraction from the silence in their home. For Archie, it was another betrayal by an inanimate object, and he lashed out with his foot, his rage as impotent as it was predictable. For Edith, the dead television sparked a final desperate act of love. She would buy him a new one for their anniversary, a gift to fill the silence, a bright, colorful screen to distract them from their own bleak reality. The bank was a cold, indifferent world of polished surfaces and polite dismissals. The loan officer, Mr. Faraday, listened to her plea with a patient, condescending smile. He dismantled her life with a series of quiet, bureaucratic questions. her part-time work, her meager possessions, her very identity as a homemaker. He weighed them on his corporate scales and found them wanting. The work she did, the endless cycle of cooking and cleaning and caring that constituted the entirety of her existence, was dismissed as just housework. It was not real work. It had no value. In that moment, Edith felt the full weight of her own invisibility. For 30 years, she had labored in the service of a life that the world refused to recognize. She was not a partner, not a contributor, but a dependent, an appendage to her husband. The anger that rose in her was a foreign, terrifying thing. She closed her small accounts, a futile gesture of rebellion against an insurmountable system. Case closed, she said the words, tasting like ash in her mouth. Her last resort was Archie. She came to him not as a wife, but as a petitioner, and he met her plea with the same casual dismissal as the banker. He was the boss, he reminded her, the one who controlled the money. It was then that something inside Edith finally broke. She presented him with her invoice, a desperate, heartbreaking calculation of her life's worth. $1 a week for 30 years, $1,560. It was a pathetic sum for a lifetime of devotion, but it was hers. She had earned it. Archie stared at her, his mind unable to process this rebellion. He saw it not as a plea for recognition, but as an act of treason, a nonsensical demand for payment for the work that God gave you to do. The argument that followed was the death rattle of their marriage. All the unspoken resentments, all the years of quiet sacrifice and unacknowledged labor came pouring out of Edith in a torrent of anguish. The secret of the television was eventually revealed, and Archie, shamed into a corner, offered her the money. He tried to frame it as a gift, a magnanimous gesture, but Edith, for the first time, refused the comforting illusion. "It ain't a present, Archie," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "It's my pay." She took the $500 as a first installment, informing him of the outstanding balance to be paid in $5 weekly increments. It was not a victory. It was a tragedy, quantified. Their marriage had been reduced to a ledger, their life together, a debt to be slowly, painfully repaid. Nothing would be the same, because for the first time they both understood the precise, miserable cost of their life together and knew that it could never truly be paid in full.